Hi and welcome to ReaperTV. In today's episode of How to Build Your Home Studio for Free, we're going to be concentrating on guitars, specifically amp sims, impulse responses, effects pedals, and how we can take all those free options and convert those over and actually replace a commercially available option in a mix. So let's take a look at all that right now. So I've got part of a track that I'm currently working on in front of me, and we've got the guitar parts and everything set up and some rough mixing going on and some rough EQ. Nothing spectacular, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly play that for you so you can hear it as a full mix. Then I'm going to solo out the guitar, and then I'm going to replace that with the free options, and we'll see how easy it is to actually get that to sit in the mix and get great sounds. So let's take a listen to what we currently have. Okay, so that gives you some idea of the audio that we're working with, and what I'll do now is I'll solo that guitar out just so you can listen to that part specifically and the kind of tone we've got sitting in the mix there for that. So in this instance, you can see that all I've got on my guitar tracks are easy mix instances, and I've got some EQ being applied to that. So if I open up the relevant track, you can see that what we're working with is one instance of easy mix, and we're using the aggression from Metal Amps pack, and I'm using a pretty basic EQ. So all I'm doing is taking out any excess low frequency that I don't want. I've scrubbed through, found some of the frequencies that I find a little bit annoying, a little bit sort of fizzy, and I've taken off around about 20k just to remove any of the actual high-end fizz, just to allow this to sit in the mix. But what I've done with this is obviously with the aggression amp, and we're going to come back in and change that later just to compensate for the change in amplifiers. So for this time being, we'll just disable this particular effect. So we've now just got the easy mix. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable that as well, just so we're only working with a clean DI signal. And once we've got that in there, we can now come in and start adding in our free amp sims. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly just come in and we're going to choose from one of the Lapoo amp packs. Now you can see I've got five available to me. I've got a hybrid, the LE456, the Lecto, Legion, and Lextac. I could use any of the Crow Lab ones, where you've got the 7170 or the 8505. Or we've got the Ignite Emissary to work with. We've got a lot of different options, and what I'll do is I'll show you some of those later on. We'll swap some of the amps out and take a listen to some of the different sounds we've got available. But I know for this particular example that the LE456, which is based upon the Engel, that's the one that sits nicely and kind of replicates the best or closest to the easy mix tone that I was working with. So I'm going to drag that up, and we've got that set up on there. And I'm also going to, in this example, now I could use the Ignite amps and I could use the Nadir Impulse Loader, but I like, for this particular example, the Mercurial Cab version 3, which again is completely free, and we're going to use the stock impulse responses that ship with that. But again, we could quite easily load in any impulse response we want by simply clicking X on there, select the folder for any of the impulse responses, or we could use Nadir and load in anything from there. But like I say, for this example, I'm going to stick to the 456 and the Mercurial Cab. Now let's make sure we've got those in the right order. So we need to make sure we've got the amp before the cab. And let's just take a listen to that now as it is. So with the DI signal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly introduce the different settings that I want to use just to get a starting point and show you how the different settings on the amp and the actual cab loader, how they're going to influence the sound. can EQ that a bit more, and we can come in and adjust that as we see fit. But I think that's given us a good approximation of where we were previously with the original commercial option. So let's take a listen to that now in the mix and see what we think of that. And then I can, like I say, I'll re-enable the EQ, reposition that. I'd probably have to go and tweak it, but you know, it'll give you a good idea of what we're working with. So as you can see, I think that gives a good approximation of the original commercial version, and it sounds pretty good, and everything on this is completely and utterly free. The EQ is the stock EQ that ships with Reaper, and I'm sure whatever DAW you choose to work with is going to give you a good EQ. And we will look at EQ options in a future video. But that's the LE456 running through the Mercurial cab. Like I say, it gives a good starting point. Let's take a look at some of the other amp options and how they sound and how we can tweak those, just to give you a sort of an idea of the different range of amplifiers that are out there and give you different sort of tones for different kinds of music that you might want to record. So let's start by just simply disabling the LE456 from the signal chain. So we'll just disable that. I won't delete it, just disable it. And we'll come in and we'll choose a different amplifier. So first up, we're going to take a look at the emissary from Ignite Amps. We're going to quickly jump straight into the distorted channel, the gain channel, and I'm going to adjust a few knobs on there just so you can listen to see what this sounds like as an amplifier. So next up, we've got the Lecto by Poulan Plugins. So let's take a listen to that one, which is based on a dual rectifier. So let's take a look at the next one. So in this example, we're going to go over to the Nick Crow Labs 8505 alongside the Mercurial Cab 3. Now, there's one thing we've got available to us in this that we didn't have with any of the Lapoo plugins or with the Ignite amps, and that's the fact that this 8505 has actually been tuned to work with the Mercurial Cab. So what we do is we can simply choose the input tuning of 8505. So that's now going to be very faithful to what this particular amplifier would have sounded like in the environment. So let's try that out on its own, and once we've done that, we'll then switch over and we'll put it into the mix like we have with all the other ones. So let's take a listen. pairing this up with the tuned Mercurial Cab version 3 really is a good option. But hopefully what you've seen with all of the amps we've taken a look at today is that they all give you a great way of creating fantastic tones. Well, in the next video, we'll take a look at where we can work with clean signals. So we'll use the amplifier, we'll use the cab modeling, and what we'll also do then is we'll take a look at some chorus pedals and delays and things that allow us to get a more clean tone that we can work with. So we're not just giving this just to the rock music kind of thing and the metal. Well, I hope you found this video useful. I hope it has given you insight into how you can get great tones without spending a penny. If you did find the video useful, please hit the subscribe button below to be kept up to date with all the new content we add on a weekly basis. If you've got any comments, questions, or feedback on this video or anything else we cover on the channel, please pop those in the comment section below. We read everything you post and try to answer every single question. Well, until next time, happy mixing.